So I couldn't speak, there was no point in here. Makes no sense. What I find really interesting is that the topic that we wanted to discuss is the role of who Satan is in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the moment I wanted to speak about him and tell you a couple of really important points, that's what happens to me. You know, I lose my voice, so I can't speak. So the enemy doesn't want me to do this, but we are, as Christians and Orthodox Christians, we are persistent. So we will continue with that topic, which I think it is important for us to discuss it without going into conspiracy theories or cult or some weird stuff out there, but be firmly based in the teachings of the church and what the Bible says about Satan. So before I start, I'm going to ask you, who is Satan? Who is he?
Fallen angel.
Sorry, you need to speak up.
Fallen angel.
Fallen angel. Okay, yeah.
The tempter.
Tempter, so he has a particular role, particular angle that he is, when he's looking at us, he's constantly tempting. He's a fallen angel. What else do we know about him?
The deceiver?
Deceiver, very interesting. So when he speaks, it's never the truth. It's always lies or half-truths or something completely made up. So deceiver, he is never telling the truth. What does he look like? I'm pretty sure
Apparently he was really handsome or something, really beautiful. He was the most beautiful.
He used to be one of the most beautiful, handsome angels. There is such a thing, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Shapeshifter, interesting, yeah, absolutely. So that's very interesting. It's a modern term, shapeshifter. But both Old Testament and New Testament says that Lucifer, Satan, can take any form if God allows it. So again, shapeshifter, he can change what he looks like. What do we see in the movies? What does he look in the movies?
You can see multiple perspectives of what he may look like. Sometimes they make him red with horns, sometimes they make him a person who's intentionally attractive to portray that he's to tempt people towards him.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a pop culture, sometimes he's seen as a half man, half god, sometimes, quite ridiculous, but sometimes he's portrayed as one of us, as a human, and usually quite handsome, again, attractive. So that's interesting. And again, as we continue talking about Satan in the Old Testament and the New Testament, keep that in mind. What is sort of out there in the pop culture, what we presented, and what the biblical text actually says. So the word itself, I think it's important when we talk about things, when we discuss these biblical concepts, to be really careful what we're talking about. Because sometimes, the moment we translate something into another language, doesn't matter which language to which language, the words kind of lose meaning or become something else. So the word, the original word in Hebrew and in Greek, it actually means the adversary, someone who is accusing, like a prosecutor type of thing. So it's really interesting. We don't think about that. When we say Satan, we already have an image in our heads, whether from the movies, books, or anything like that. But we rarely think or pay attention what the word originally meant. So in the Old Testament, you see this sense of the word that means adversary, someone who is accusing someone of something. So in a sense, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail. In the Old Testament, it's not a person or a name, particular name. It's more of a role. So it's a role of the accuser, persecutor. Only later, when we go to the Old Testament and the New Testament, we start to see more and more that Satan is actually a person. That there is a real person, real presence there. So these are the things that I wanted to say to you when I lost my voice, and he didn't want me to tell you this. So this is free of charge. I'm not charging anything. Christ didn't charge anything, but I'll tell you four things that are really important. So first one, God did not create evil or Satan. All right, that's the very first thing. God cannot create evil. God is good. And I'll unpack that. Satan is never and cannot be ever equal to God. So you need to understand that. There's a lot of people out there who are obsessed by devil, by the power of devil, by talking about him, almost equal, making him equal to God. And the two are not equal. So there is no dualism. There is no that on one side you have God and that he's powerful, and then Satan is equally powerful, but opposite of God. Nothing like that. Third thing is, and this is a cliche that you probably heard, the most important thing the devil has done is to make people think that he doesn't exist. If you believe that he doesn't exist, half of his job is already done. So Satan, according to Orthodox teaching, is a real entity, a real person. There's a real sense of him. It's not just the absence of good in this abstract point of when you're talking about it in abstract terms. So he is a real entity. That's not popular to say these days. People don't talk about very often, but he is real. There are priests that I have spoken to that have seen this presence, this entity, that dealt with this entity. And it can be terrifying at times. And the fourth thing that I want to say to you, there is a battle going on. And this battle is on. We are fighting visible and invisible forces. And that's what we call in Orthodoxy ascesis. Ascesis. Thank you. Ascesis. So we are constantly fighting these powers around us. So before each liturgy, before we start with the liturgy proper, there is a prayer that we finish before we go into the liturgy. And it talks and says something like this. I'm going to quickly read it to you. O God, the Lord of hosts, and fashioner of all creation, by the tender compassion of your mercy, which transcends comprehension, you sent your only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, for the salvation of our race, who by his precious cross tore up the records of our sins and thereby triumphed over the principalities and powers of darkness. O Master, Lord of mankind, accept even from us sinners these prayers of thanksgiving and entreaty, and deliver us from every destructive and dark transgression, and from all enemies, visible and invisible, that seek to do us harm. So this is the prayer that we say for 2,000 years before every liturgy, acknowledging that we are in the middle of the battle between the visible and invisible forces that try to do us harm. However, fear not, because you're sons and daughters of God, and you're within the ark, being the church, you are saved. So I just want to say that as well. Because again, there's a lot of unhealthy focus on the power of darkness, power of devil, and what he can do to us, and so on and so forth. So we'll unpack those four things as we continue. So back to my point about the words. So the word Satan, when it's a verb, it means accuser, someone who is obstructing things, opposing things. And when it's a noun in the text, whether Greek or Hebrew, it's same. It's often written as ha-satan, which means the accuser or the prosecutor. So again, it's more of a role than a personal name, as we know it today. So, again, words we need to be really careful when we read these texts, because every time you open the Bible, you come with your own perceived, your own upbringing, your own convictions, your own beliefs already. And when you read that text, that kind of colors what you're reading. So it's really important to look at the text independently as much as you can. And really have a look what the text is saying. If you don't know Hebrew and Greek, there's a lot of internet sites that can help you with that. So often the word, this might be a shock to you guys, but often the word Satan, in the Old Testament especially, is used for people who are the enemies. So again, if the word becomes the adversary, someone who is opposing someone else. So have a look in your Bibles. In the Orthodox Bible, it's 1 Kingdoms 29:4, or 1 Samuel in other Bibles if someone else has another Bible. So 1 Kingdoms 29 and verse 4. 1 Kingdoms or 1 Samuel 29 and number 4. So this is a story about King David. At this point of time, he's hiding with the Philistines, with the enemy, within the enemy lines. Behind the enemy lines, he's hiding from King Saul, who's trying to kill him. But at one point of time, there's this discussion about him, about King David, and one of the Philistine commanders, is worried about King David. And he says the following, so 29 verse 4, but the commanders of the Philistines were grieved because of him. So they said to him, return the man to the place you appointed for him. Do not let him go with us to battle, for fear that he become our adversary in the battle. So the word adversary, if you look at the Greek or Hebrew, is the word Satan. So what I'm saying to you is sometimes words can mean different things, and in many cases, it's just that word, enemy, adversary, someone who's obstructing, not the Satan that we understand, that we think of immediately. There's other cases like this in 2 Kingdoms. David calls one of his friends, enemies, a Satan, because he's wanting to kill someone else. There's another example later on, similar, where the enemies of King Solomon are called Satans. But what it tells you is that sometimes the word is just applicable, applied to a human, not a supernatural Satan, the way we understand it. But it could be a military leader, a military enemy, a political enemy, could be a legal term, as in prosecution, often in a court setting. So it is important when you read the Bible not to jump with your preconceived ideas and impose them on the text. You need to understand what the text is saying first, as it is. So it's interesting here that the word can be applied to a human rather than this entity that when we say Satan, that's what we mean. Another really important,
Sorry.
Yeah.
In the New Testament, doesn't Jesus Christ call Peter Satan? He tells him to get behind me, Satan, because he didn't want to accept the will of what God needed to do. Jesus Christ for our sake.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. So it's interesting again how one word can be used in many different contexts depending on the context as well. So that's a good point. That's a really important passage in the New Testament. Now go to the book of Numbers. So that's towards the beginning of the Old Testament. Book of Numbers, chapter 22, where we have a very interesting story about talking donkey. And a sorcerer whose name is Balaam, who is trying, King Balak asked this sorcerer to put the curse on the Israelites. And he was ready to do it, but he couldn't. He simply couldn't do it. God would not allow him to curse Israelites. So this is Numbers 22, chapter 22, verses 22 and 32. So Numbers 22 and 32. But you see those words again. So it's describing an angel of God, and clearly says that the angel of God stationed there himself to divert him. And the word divert, again, obstruct or change or along those lines, is lesatan or diabole in Greek. And in verse 33, it says, 32, the angel of God then said to him, why did you strike your donkey 3 times? Behold, I came out as your adversary, as the Satan again. So that doesn't mean that this angel of God is Satan as we understand it again today. I can see some people going, wow, this is interesting. So sometimes, again, the word is the role. It's not the entity, it's not the cosmic, power, whatever that means. Satan is simply someone who's opposing something. So in this case, the angel of God is described as having that role, opposing this sorcerer from doing what he is wanting to do and protecting him from sin. So that leads me to the very famous book, the book of Job, which I ask you guys to read the first 2 chapters. Now, the book of Job is often described as the Shakespeare of the Old Testament. Like, it is so well written that even if you don't believe in Christianity and God and anything like that, when you read that book, it has the quality equal to Shakespeare. So it's so well written. So what do we see in chapters 1 and 2 of the book of Job?
I'm sorry, you said Job or Job?
Job.
Job.
G-O-B.
Alright.
J-O-B. I know who read it. You all did. So what do we see? What do we know about Job? Let's do that. What do you know about Job right now?
He was a rich man.
He was a rich man. He was beyond, he was like Elon Musk these days. Just he had lots of cars and sheep and whatnot. And Elon Musk has other things. But that was the rich. Yeah, he was very rich. What else?
He lost everything.
Sorry?
He lost everything.
He lost everything. Why did he lose everything?
God allowed Satan to take everything away from him to see if he'll keep his faith.
It's a very interesting book. I'll get back to that. Do you want to say something?
Oh no, I was just going to say really nice that joke as a book.
It is one of those books that people often go to when something terrible is happening. You're looking for a meaning of life. In my personal life, again, many of us who came to Australia as refugees, we had everything one day. Next day, it's all gone. And that's material stuff. We're not talking, more other stuff that you can lose, wives, family members, and whatnot. It makes you think. It makes you question everything. It makes you curse God. It makes you fight, people around you, and whatever. You're struggling to understand what's happening. So this book, again, is about a very rich man who had everything. Not just material, he had family, he had connections, everything. And one day he loses everything. One by one, things are taken away from him. And we read, as you continue reading the book of Job, you're reading how he is constantly saying, but I have done nothing wrong. And people around him are saying, you must have done something, because God wouldn't do this. You've done something. And you have all these friends that are popping up and telling him how he must have done something. God would not do this just because he can. What we know as readers, when you read chapter 1 and 2, is that there is this court scene, court-like scene. And there is the heavenly court, and God is there with his angels, and the Satan comes. And he basically says, well, it's easy for Job. He has everything because he has everything. He believes in you. The moment you challenge him, he's going to pull away from you. He will not believe in you. So it's interesting what God says. Go and test him. Don't harm him. but do what you need to do. But he will not betray me. He will continue being believing in me. So one by one, we see how he loses everything material. He loses his daughters and his family. At the end, he becomes unwell with all these sores around his body, and he's cursing the day that he's born. You know, he is not. Sometimes we have this misunderstanding about Job as being this righteous person who just put up with everything and somehow kept his faith. Careful reading of that book shows you that he was angry. He was saying, why are you doing this to me? I'm innocent. Why is this happening? And the funny or not so funny part of this book is, at the end, we don't know why God did what he did. It's never answered. But God says to him in a very nice, polite way, you are a creature, I'm the creator. I have created this universe before you were born, and I have a plan, and everything is according to my plan, and you will be okay. And at the end, what we see is everything that he's lost is given 2 times more, including new daughters and new children and whatnot. So it's quite a difficult book to grapple on many different levels. Often people go trying to find, if they are suffering, they're trying to understand and learn from suffering Job, and that's fine. But some of these main questions are never clearly answered in the book. But what do we see in the first 2 chapters? We have this scene of the Satan being there in the court, in the heavenly court, among all the angels. So how does that make you feel? Is that something that's kind of expected, normal? So that is the most important part right there. So we can talk about, is he really there, who he is this an angel that has this role of being the Satan, the accuser, or is it the Satan as the evil entity? But the point is, exactly what he said to Yonah. In all of this, God is in absolute control, and he says to him, you can only do these things. You cannot harm him. You cannot go beyond. You don't have any power. So this Satan, and it's called the Satan, not Satan, so it has the article, which means it's a role. It's this the prosecutor in the court, in the heavenly court. He cannot do anything without God's permission. So immediately we understand that this evil entity, even if we see Satan, as we understand it in Job, he cannot do anything on his own. That God is the one who has absolute authority, and he gives the permission a couple of times. So in Job 1:12, let's have a look what it says there. So Job 1:12. 1:12, then the Lord said to the devil, behold, whatever he has I give into your hand, but do not touch him. Thus the devil went out from the Lord. And later on in chapter 2, verse 6, on the second page. So the Lord said to the devil, behold, I give him over to you, only spare his life. So, what I was saying to you again at the beginning, this subconsciously sometimes we think about devil having this equal power as God. That's not true. God is the only all-powerful, and he sometimes allows people to be tested, and we'll get to that why in a second. But the permission needs to come from God, and only within what God, the parameters that God says. So we could spend a whole semester just talking about the book of Job. It is a fascinating book, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. So if you have time, you can read it. So that's one court scene that we see in the book of Job, where we see this entity, this role, the Satan being present. If you go now to a little known and very short book in the Old Testament, the book of Zechariah, so that's in the Old Testament, we find another interesting example where the Satan is present. And if you have a look at the book of Zechariah, chapter 3, it talks about Joshua, the high priest, and basically says, and the devil stood at the right hand and opposed him, opposed the high priest. It's almost like a scene, the court scene where you have the judge being God, and then you have the prosecutor being the devil, and someone who's accused, which is the high priest. And immediately God says, and the Lord said to the devil, the Lord rebukes you, O devil, even the Lord choosing for himself Jerusalem rebukes you. Behold, is this one not like the brand plucked from the fire? So basically what it says is, even before the Satan could accuse this high priest, God stops him and says, we're not talking about this. The case is closed. But what you see again is there's this role of prosecutor that is present there in the heavenly tribunals, heavenly court, and it's still a role. We don't see the devil as the entity as we know it from the New Testament. So I'm going to pause there and I'm going to summarize, I guess, so far what we said. So what you start seeing in the Old Testament, definitely, and the next part I will talk is the Genesis, we see this notion of the role of the accuser. And then as you move through Old Testament, and you get to the body of the literature that probably was written around 200 years before Christ was born and 100 years after he was born, you start seeing clearer picture that the Satan is not just a role, that this is an entity that has some kind of power. And then when you get to the New Testament, when Christ comes in, we can see that he is tested by the Satan himself, the entity, the evil entity that we know and we understand. So there is a bit of a progression there. Often what you see in the Old Testament are these shadows, these sort of, you can see it but not clearly. And you guys who have been coming to my lectures, you will probably remember that I kept saying, the Old Testament you can only understand through the eyes of Christ. When Christ shines, when he comes to this earth, all these other things you start being clear, seeing much clearer, including who Satan is. So in the Old Testament, it's a role more than an entity or person. Even in Genesis, the famous passage where there's the serpent that is tempting Eve, and it's described as the most cunning than all the wild animals. The word is not used, the word that's used is not Satan. It doesn't say Satan or Diabolos or anything like that in Greek. It's a serpent. But it's more cunning than all the wild animals. So there is no identification, this is Satan. However, every single church father, Orthodox Church, and everyone else, he will say, yes, that was Satan. But what I'm saying to you, when you look at the text, without the New Testament, you only see glimpses. You see something is not right, only through the eyes of Christ. When you see it through the New Testament, you can clearly see that there was something quite demonic there. So we start to see these first moments of when the devil becomes this entity in the Old Testament in the wisdom of Solomon. So again, it's one of those books that it's not very well known among the Orthodox, even Orthodox people, let alone everyone else. So Wisdom of Solomon, if you go to chapter 2, beautiful book, really important, and again I would highly recommend reading it. So Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, 24. But death entered the world by the envy of the devil, and those of his portion entered. So this is the first sort of time that we start seeing that the death entered the world by the envy of the devil, Diabolos or Hasatan. I often say to people who bring you to the faith, don't read the Bible starting with Genesis. Read the end. Because we as Christians, we know the end. So what has Christ done for us? I know, very serious, deep theological question, but I expect one sentence answers. What has Christ done for us?
Died for us.
He died for us so that we...
We inherit eternal life.
That's right. So read the end. Know that He won. Christ has won. So sometimes when we start reading from the beginning, and again, that's fine, but I'm making a point here. If you start with Genesis and you go to the Old Testament, by the time you get to Leviticus, most of people just lose the will to live and don't read anymore. You need to understand that death has lost the power. That the devil doesn't have any power. Christ has won. You are sons and daughters of God. Don't be afraid of it. Don't go into this spin about what devil can do to you. If you come to church, that's a big if. So I'm going to highlight it and put a neon sign where if you come to church every Sunday, if you receive the body and blood of Christ, the devil can do nothing to you. You are untouchable. Christ has won. Know the end of the story. Christ has won. So very interesting passage. And again, I think I said this so many times. It's interesting that in our Orthodox liturgical life, the only book from the New Testament that we don't use in our liturgy is the book of Revelation, the very last book. Because of such a symbolic, difficult language that is so difficult to understand. But I will ask you to go to the book of Revelation, so the very last book. There's something incredible happens that we read in that book, which again, if you read again, you know that we're going to be fine if we come to church. So the book of Revelation, chapter 12. So chapter 12, and if you read from, maybe Luke, if you can read for us, the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verses 7 to 9.
And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
So now we have seen this clear picture that there was a cosmic battle of some sort. Something that has gone wrong on a cosmic scale. And obviously the Archangel Michael was there with his angels fighting the dragon, being the Satan. And we know, again, that Christ has won. Some angels fell with Satan. So we're going to go from the end of the book now to the book of Isaiah. So let's go. We're going to really learn to find your way in the Bible tonight. So the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament and chapter 14. And I hope you can see how, again, everything is connected. The very last book that was probably written probably 100 years after Christ, when the Apostle John was writing the book of Revelation, it was probably close to 100 years after Christ, is connected to what we see in the book of Isaiah and other books. So book of Isaiah, chapter 14. And because I'm a boy and I can't talk and do two things at the same time, Luca, can you please read chapter 14, verses 12 to 15?
How you were fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, who rose up in the morning, He who sent for all the nations is crushed to the earth. If you say in your mind, I will ascend into heaven, I will place my throne above the stars of heaven. I will sit on a lofty mountain, on the lofty mountains towards the north. I will ascend above the clouds. I will be like the Most High. But now you shall descend to Hades, to the foundations of the earth. Those who see you will marvel at you, and they will say, this is the man who greatly upset the earth, who shook kingdoms, and who...
That's okay. Thank you. So have a look at those verses 12 to 15. What do you see? What are those verses saying?
Lucifer wanted to be above God, but now he's in Hades.
Funny that. It's interesting, isn't it? He wanted to be more and above than God himself. If you think about Genesis, what he's offering to Adam and Eve. What did he say to Adam and Eve?
Something about having the same powers as God.
You're going to be immortal, you're going to be as God is. Something interesting happens in Genesis. When you think about it, to a degree, he's offering the same thing that God offers. He just wants to give them a shortcut to get it quicker in a sense. So God is promising immortal life. Satan is saying, I'm offering you the same, just I can tell you how to do it much quicker. It's interesting that there's this sense of pride that starts, we read that in Genesis, the sense of pride that this angel, the most beautiful angel, someone was talking about that, the most beautiful angel, the one that was created by God. And Lucifer, the word Lucifer actually means morning star or light bearer in the Latin version of the text. So he's described as this most beautiful angel that somehow thought he can be more and above than what he was created for. He's offering the same thing to Adam and Eve. Shortcuts to become like gods. So this is really important. That text in Isaiah that we just read, chapter 14, 12 to 15, when you read it in the context, it is actually about a king of Babylon that's being discussed at that time for those people, original audience that was hearing this text for the same time, for the first time. But we also know that the text can have multiple meanings at the same time. That's why we need church fathers to discern, the deeper meanings, not just the historical meaning of this text. And you can clearly see that this text is also talking about this, the hubris, the pride and downfall of this being, this entity, this Satan, who was created as an angel. So again, evil wasn't created by God. It cannot be created by God. He was created as any other angel. And this is really important for all of us, because again, we are daughters and sons of God. We are not slaves. We are not mindless drones. We are not robots. We have the free will to pick and choose whether we serve Him or not. Angels have that option as well. Briefly in their existence, they can make their minds up and choose either to be angels or to be demons. Once they make that decision, there is no going back. We talked about that when we were discussing angels a couple of months ago. While we have this beautiful, most terrifying gift that God gave us, that we can pick and choose repeatedly, falling down into sin, going to compassion, trying to do better. Isn't that beautiful that God gives us so much that we can unfortunately sin many times, but also be fortunate enough to actually choose the right path again until we die. The moment you die, after that there is no changing. So that's why, again, I can't say, what is the word with that? Ascesis. Ascesis, the word ascesis, actually in Greek means exercise, like the gym, you go to exercise. So this is a spiritual exercise. We are in this battle constantly, and we are in the battle until we die. So it's interesting again that this paragraph is talking about the Lucifer. There is another paragraph that I'm going to skip in the book of Ezekiel that talks about a very similar thing. It says, I appointed you to be one of the cherub, with the cherubim. So you will cast wounded from the mountain of God. And then it says, because of the multitude of your sins, I cast you to the ground before kings I set forth as an example. What do we see then? So we are sort of finishing with the Old Testament, and now we're going into this period that I was talking about, 200 years before Christ was born, 100 years after. This is the time when the most Israelites were in the exile, in Babylon, later on Persia. And in Persia, you had a religion called Zoroastrianism, which was very black and white, good and bad, evil and good. And it was dualism. They were equal. There was a good stuff, good gods or God and bad, but they were equal. That's what we call dualism. Again, according to Orthodox Christian understanding, there is no such a thing. Satan doesn't have the same power that God has. God is the all-powerful one. But what we see is, in that material that was written around those years, that time, the book of Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the book of Jubilees, and others, we start to see the names of the demons. You start to see names like Belial, Mastema, Azazel, the book of Tobit, when we talk about it, Asmodeus. They're starting to be named. These demons are starting to have names, which wasn't the case before. So I'll skip that part, and we now come to the New Testament, so the time of Jesus. So by the time of Jesus, this thought of, when people were thinking and talking about the Satan, it definitely moved from this Satan being the role to Satan being the entity. This evil entity, Diablos, slanderer. And when they talk about Satan, it is a proper name of a single entity. He's often described as the leader of a kingdom of evil spirits. He's actively opposing God. And he is linked to death, to sin, and he is this enemy that needs to be defeated. Can you see how that changed now from the Old Testament, where it's kind of shadows, murky? It's still there, but it's not crystallized. Now in the New Testament, we clearly see that the Satan is actually an entity, a single being. So we have this shift that's happening, theological shift as well. So it's a proper name. What we see in the New Testament, he is described as the tempter, the evil one, the ruler or prince of this world in John, the god of this age, Beelzebub, the dragon, the ancient serpent, the Revelation, the accuser, again, the Revelation. These are the titles that we see. So Jesus comes, he starts his mission, he has his disciples around him. What does Jesus do very often in terms of we will be discussing the topic tonight? So what happens? What does he do often? He is confronting,
Performing exorcisms?
performing exorcism, confronting people that are possessed. So now we're starting to see something interesting. This demonic being has the power to possess people. In the book of Tobit, if you remember, we talked about this Asmodeus, this demonic being, being responsible for the death of 7 husbands of this poor woman. And I always imagine that. Every first night of the marriage, she goes in and the husband dies. 7 times. And we see that they can do harm. They can do some harm. So Jesus himself is tempted in Matthew 4 and Luke 4, chapters 4. So Satan personally tempts Jesus. And significantly, more significantly, he says that he has the authority of all the kingdoms of the world. That he has the authority, the Satan has the authority of all the kingdoms of the world. What's even more interesting, Jesus doesn't say, no, you don't. But that is really interesting. So this angel that became Satan, his role was to take care of terrestrials or the sphere, earth. And without Christ's resurrection, he was running this place. He was in absolute control. And the hubris again, the pride, he comes to Christ and he says to the creator of the universe, I'll give you the authority of all the kingdoms, just believe in me, join me. So what we see from these moments, from these parables, stories, also that the devil knows his Bible. He knows the Old Testament. He quotes from the text. So he's aware of these things. So we see again the expansion of what we talked about the book of Job in this royal court, canonical court. We now see Christ almost being challenged by prosecutor, by Satan challenging him and claiming the authority over the whole earth. So he's again called the ruler of this world to be cast out. He enters Judas and causes him to do what he has done. In the epistles, we see also very interesting what Apostle Paul is saying. God of this age, Satan transformed himself into an angel. This is interesting, so let's start again. So this is in 2 Corinthians 11:14. Satan can transform himself into an angel of light. I'll pick that up later on, but this is interesting again. He was saying he can trick us. He can present himself to us as an angel. And if you're not careful, you start believing. We have religions out there that have started by angelic visitation. Angels that pretended to be like the angel of God. Whole religion started based on this. And we hear here that that's exactly what he does. He can transform himself to look like an angel of light. So, to sum up so far, in the New Testament and the Old Testament. So early in the Old Testament, we see the word Satan being applied to humans, to political or military figures, enemies. In that middle part between the Old Testament and the New Testament, it becomes we read about his heavenly office or the function. There's a function, court of the function, but he is subordinate to God. He can't do anything without God's permission. The church fathers clearly see the devil being in the serpent, and see in that serpent seeing the demonic being. But yeah, so in this middle part between the Old Testament and the New Testament, we start to see these demonic beings being seen as rebels, cosmic rebels, or being named, becoming like personified. In the New Testament, what we see is that he is the ruler of this age, and he is tempting. He is tempting us, he is tempting the apostles, even Christ himself. So who is he? We started with that. And it was really good answers. He was created as an angel. And he fell from that grace because of his pride. So Saint Philotheos of Sinai says this: he desired in his arrogance to become like the Creator in authority. and he was justly abounded by God to the same degree that he himself had first abounded God. So total was his affection for God that he became his opponent and an adversary and manifest enemy. So while we express our gratitude through the prayer, we see this ingratitude in Satan, unnatural state. It's not a natural state for us humans to be, or angels, to feel that. On one side you have pride as Satan. On the other side you have the humility of Christ. So Satan wanted this equality with God, but pride separated him from God. So when we talk about pride, and Holy Fathers often say that is the downfall of our downfall as well. It starts with the pride. So what pride usually leads to? Many things. Try to guess what I have in mind. Sin, envy. So what I'm looking for is also envy. So I just want to discuss that with you. Why would the devil be so focusing on us humans? Yeah. What is that grace of God? What do we have? Yeah. So it's a really interesting point, really well said. So we know that before God created earth, there was a spiritual world that he created with all the angels. Some of the angels, as we heard from the text, have fallen away from God. So the pride in terms of those angels, the pride led to envy. And where the envy comes from? So God created this invisible world, and spiritual world, and then he creates us, a being that did not exist in the universe. There was no such a thing as humans. And Satan goes, well, what's the deal with these guys? Like, why do you need them? And everything the devil wanted, God gives us for free. He gives this opportunity to us to become like him, to become almost, not God, we can never become God, but as perfect as he is, to be in communion with him. And devil can't handle that. He cannot understand that. Why would, in his mind, a lesser creature be given so much grace? So much grace that has a free will. And get this is when my little mind just blew, completely into pieces when I read about this from the church fathers. On top of that, what God does, he becomes one of us and takes our nature onto him, to him, inside of him. That's why he's so envious. I know there's a bit of a deep theology here, but I want you to reflect on this. How we are created in the image and likeness of God. The devil, Satan, demanded this likeness. He wanted the authority. He wanted to be above God. He wanted to become like him, and he can't because of the pride, because of the envy, because of the sin. And God, even though he led us astray, the devil, God still becomes one of us, assumes our human nature through Christ, brings us across this void that existed before, so that we can become immortal as he wanted us to be from day one, from the moment he created us. We are not created immortal, that's very important. We are created with potential to be immortal.
I was going to ask, what are the angels created in the light of? Are they similar to us in being, you say are mortal but then the perfect? And how different are they to the human condition?
Oh, that's a good question. So there is a whole video on the angels, so that will be explained there. But what you're talking about, I think it's also very quickly. So the devil and the demons were angels, and they are created again perfect. Everything that God creates is perfect. It cannot be imperfect, it cannot be bad, it cannot be evil. But they were given free will as well. So the moment you have the free will, you can decide. So again, angels, the devil and the demons fall away. So there's still a difference. Church fathers are talking about the difference between the demons and the angels. Angels are these completely different from us. Their bodies are different, so they have a body, but it's more ethereal, it's not like heavy as ours. And something interesting happens with demons. Their bodies are not as angelic. They are a little bit, I use the word heavier or more dense, but they are not like ours either. So somewhere in between. But in a sense of how they were created to serve God. That's the role that they had. And then we were created, and the angels are supposed to serve us as well. And that's why he can't handle it. The Satan doesn't want to serve us. But there's a whole
So in theory then can they swap sides like today?
No.
So an angel can go
Really important, really good point of view. Thank you for asking, clarifying that. So the moment angels are created, they have, I don't know what the moment means in eternity, but there is a point when they're created that they can pick and choose a side. And once they make their mind up, that's it. So an angel who became a devil can never, ever, ever become an angel again. So C.S. Lewis, I think I sent that yesterday on chat group, I said that hell is actually locked from the inside. So, it's not that God is punishing people as such. It is the sense of, the minds of these angels, demons that are as such, so poisoned that they cannot be anything else. They cannot. We had church fathers who would say, who was so good that they would want to pray for the devil so he can come back into, and obviously the church again, the Lord would say to them, no, don't pray. Again, it's the free will. We can't do anything. Once the angels make their mind up, that's it. We have this most beautiful and most terrifying gift. We can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until you die. But that's what He's given to us. We have ability to reframe our lives constantly. But you have a look at the site. There is a whole video about the angels that might be talking a little bit more about. So talking about us as humans, we are the only beings out there who can receive the deified body and blood of Christ through the Eucharist. So I'll actually skip a couple of things. I'll go to this. So this is from Saint Sophrony, what he says. Every human being is tempted and tried by this same passion. Pride is the dark abyss in which man plunged when he fell. Heeding his own will, he became spiritually blind, intoxicated in paradise by the sweet poison of Luciferian self-divinization. Man went mad and became the prisoner of hell. So this is the sense of wrong. And so powerful. Lucifer wanted to be made by himself, wanted to make himself a god. And that's what we unfortunately follow. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I know I've been talking a lot. So one of my initial couple of points that I was making is that the demons have lost their angelic power and capabilities. They still can test us if God permits that. So this is from St. John Damascene. He says, if God does give them permission, they have strength and can change and transform themselves into whatever apparent form they may desire. All evil and impure passions have been conceived by them, and they have been permitted to visit attacks upon man. This is important. But they are unable to force anyone, for it is in our power to either accept the visitation or not. So this is really important what I want to tell you. If you're a child of God, son or daughter, you come to church, you have the Eucharist, you have your confessions, you're part of the church community, you're trying to be as holy as our God is holy, demons can do nothing to you, absolutely nothing. What they can do is, again, throwing these little darts, or as I call them, fish hooks, and see what you're going to do. So God permits the devil, demons, to test us, that we in fact may be strengthened and grow spiritually. And some of you might think, but why would God do that? Why would this benevolent, beautiful God of love sometimes lead us to moments when we are tested? And every human from the dawn of civilization had the same question. So this might be helpful, for some might not be helpful. I often use military sort of terms, and I started by saying to you, we are in the middle of the battle, spiritual battle. You are sons and daughters of God, but you're also soldiers of God. There's a battle going on. As a soldier, you cannot go into the room and read the book of how to wage the war. That makes no sense. That's why sometimes things happen to us so that we can strengthen our faith, so that we can understand and rely more on God. The moment the pride starts heaping in our lives, God is there to reframe it for us. So as a soldier of God, sometimes you need to be tested by the enemy. But also what's important is that God will never put too much pressure on you. He knows our hearts. He knows how much we can handle. And let me tell you, there were moments when I was on the floor going, why are you doing this to me? I can't handle it anymore. And I'm not, I'm not ashamed to admit that. But you see, after some time, historical distance, you look back and you go, wow, that was I actually needed that. There was a reason why I have been tested in such a way. Without struggle, there is no spiritual advancement. You stagnate. God doesn't want you to stagnate spiritually or otherwise. Your relationships, personal relationships, you don't want to stagnate in those relationships. They need to evolve. God is immortal. Once you die, once you become part of Him, you still continue to grow. It never stops. So yes, sometimes we are tested, but that's for our spiritual benefit as well. Really important moment when Jesus is walking and there's this demon-possessed man who says, who recognizes who Jesus is, and he says, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. So the demons can recognize Jesus, and they run and worship him. What have I done to you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me. So that's even the demons can again recognize the power of God, and that ultimately God has all the power. I will finish with, I only have a couple more slides, but something that we find in the Epistle of James. James 1, verse 13. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. So again, sometimes we fall into this sense of God is tempting us. As in the test, even when I use that word test, we often think about school, about teachers trying to test us, to fail us. We're going to fail something. And the whole point of testing is for you to grow. So God is not some kind of mean person out there who's just making these tests for us to fail. He wants us to advance, to become even closer to Him. So very quickly, what we see, what devil can do to us. Intrusive thoughts. The thoughts that come to your mind from nowhere. It is amazing what pops in my mind during the liturgy or when I'm singing. Anything from food, which I'm not into food, to God knows what. It just pops in my mind. And sometimes those thoughts can be more sinister. So intrusive thoughts that if the devil throws that hook and you get hooked, it goes beauty. Now you're focusing on that thought, not on the liturgy, not on the prayer. So that's one thing. Lies, distortions, partial facts. That's what we see. These days, what devil does, it's not the possessions of the in the random mall. It's the internet that is, I think, devil's playground, where you see these lies, distortions, partial truths. Yeah.
Propaganda.
Propaganda, absolutely, from every point. You have this systemic propaganda that's happening at the moment. Relentless attacks to lure us into sin. Church fathers often talk about demons specializing in certain passions. Whatever it is, they're specialized demons for specialized sins. So what you can do, again, come to church, ignore those thoughts, remember that you are sons and daughters of God. When it gets more serious, there's moments when there's a spiritual delusion. We start thinking that we are on the way. We have this spiritual delusion that we are something, that we are better than others, that we are on the right path. So important to have spiritual fathers to kind of have a chat with, because that spiritual pride kicks in very often, very quickly. You start thinking that you should deserve preferential status versus someone else, that you are more spiritually advanced than someone else. You wear this, I wear this, you don't. Am I better than you? No, I'm not. I'm probably worse than you. So many different ways. But that makes us susceptible to demonic influence. All these moments of delusion. I'm going to finish with this slide. So I'll read this. This is from Saint Porphyrius of Capsocalia, who says, "Fix your gaze unwaveringly upward towards Christ. Become familiar with Christ, walk with Christ, live with Christ, breathe with Christ, suffer with Christ, rejoice with Christ. Let Christ be everything to you. No one can deny that Christ is the fullness of love. Those who deny this truth are soul sick. They deny that which they are lacking. And so the devil finds their soul empty and enters it. And just as a child is deeply traumatized if he is deprived of his father and mother in his life, so too, and much more so, is the person who is deprived of Christ." These are beautiful words, very powerful words. So, God did not create evil or Satan. God cannot be equal. Satan cannot be equal to God. There is no such a thing. He is a real person, and we need to keep fighting. I know that's probably what you don't want to hear, but there is a fight going on, and we need to keep fighting. How we fight? We come to the church. We come, we talk to our spiritual fathers. The moment the sin enters your soul, talk about it to the priests. Go for a confession. Clean that infestation, that infection, spiritual infection. If you don't, it will fester. It will become part of you. Then you're going to start thinking, oh, this is just who I am. I can't be anything else. And I'll finish always, I talk about this. You are saints. You are meant to be holy. God created you in His image. You and I are on this journey. And it's important that we have the holy community that we can talk to each other. Otherwise, one by one, the enemy will pick us up. So on that note, I'm not so positive and encouraging. I'll finish and any questions or comments?
Well, before you mentioned that demons can act like
Mm.
right?
Mm.